I'm honored to have my next guest on. He has 30 years combined experience in special operations, security, and law enforcement. He served as a Green Beret with the U.S. Army Special Forces, worked overseas on sensitive uh, contracts for multiple U.S. government agencies, and has been teaching tactical firearms since 1992 as a firearms subject matter expert. He is currently hosting and co-producing his fifth season, Trigger Time TV, that is aired weekly with up to 45 million potential viewers, with a estimate reach of 20 million uh, homes in U.S. Sorry, my handwriting is a little messed up. Reach of 20 million Sorry, I can't read my handwriting. I'm sorry about that. But anyway, Micheal runs a training company, Green Ops. Welcome to the show, Micheal.
Thanks. Glad for having you have me on. Appreciate it. Thank you.
Nice to have you on, man.
Thanks.
Awesome. I kind of like to kick it off, so people can get a good background check where you come from, where you grew up, and what intrigued you to join the military.
Well, my dad was in the military, so I grew up kind of here and there, a little bit of all over. Spent some time, overseas in Europe and Germany, different places in the States, Letterkenny Army Depot, Redstone Arsenal in Alabama. Just traveling quite a bit, changing schools every now and then. But got used to it. And, I enjoyed being an Army brat. And so it was a pretty easy fix to just go right in the military as soon as I graduated high school. So I saw it every day. My dad came home in a uniform. So it just seemed like a natural progression. And then my grandfather was in the Army. My great grandfather was in the Army. So, I guess it's a family tradition.
So you got 4 generations of Army guys, huh?
Oh yeah, and my oldest son is in the Army right now.
Oh wow,
yeah,
you got a nice little history there. And I was noticing on your bio, which is very impressive, by the way. I just want to go ahead and say that you have a lot of experience with firearms, obviously, and you're very proficient at them. Did your dad teach you? Did you just kind of fall into that profession, or was that something that you went after? Did your dad teach you how to shoot growing up? Do you have, how did you fall into that?
The firearms thing, as far as my dad teaching me, he taught me the basics of firearms when I was a younger kid. We'd go target shooting. And then when I got a little bit older, he took me hunting. But, we weren't really gun people per se. We really, I think he had a couple of pistols and a couple of shotguns and a couple of rifles, but nothing extraordinary. He didn't do any other type of shooting besides maybe a plinking every now and then, or going hunting. But for some reason, I was just fascinated by guns. I always wanted to buy guns. I had a hunting rifle and that was about it. But when I joined the military, I just became more fascinated with firearms. And then when I got in Special Forces, the training that we received there was phenomenal. I remember one of the first courses I went to. They started off and showed a U.S. PSA match at the very beginning, and showing these civilians shooting like at an amazing speed. And they're like, if you train well, you can potentially get to this level. And we're like, holy cow, like it looked almost superhuman at the time,
Right.
And so shortly after graduating that course, I started going to civilian competitions and realizing that it was a whole different level. And then when I was in the Army, at Fort Bragg, we would bring some of these top shooters in the world that were civilians, no military background, but we would bring them to Fort Bragg to train us in firearms. And now they weren't training us in tactics, but they were trying to teach us how to be more accurate and faster, all at the same time, And so that was really the key there for us. And I loved it. I love the fact that it was pushing us beyond our normal, our
limits,
normal barriers or limits. Yeah.
Mike, what was the best, talking about being a Green Beret, what was the best part of being a Green Beret and why?
Well, people ask, those kinds of questions all the time. And I sit there and I thought I would try to think about all the really cool and fun things I did. And I mean, I could tell you that, I traveled the world on the government's dime. I trained with some of the best professionals in the world, for free with the government. I got to train with Hoist Gracie, with, guys like Frank Garcia, Jerry Barnhart. I mean, top shooters in the world. But the reality of it, the best thing about Special Forces, and you don't realize it until you leave, is the people that you work with. The guys, the brotherhood, even just the way they push you. The constant, on your heels, just making you better and sharper every day. And, I before, when I was in the Army and, went through different training, I was a, honor grad of, my MOS producing school and, got like the highest GPA. And next thing I know, here I am in Special Forces, and it's like, man, I'm here towards the bottom now, So, that constant professionalism of being around guys that are better than you, smarter than you, harder and faster than you, just makes you want to be better, and, at some point, everything you do is not about how well you do. It's like, did I disappoint my guys? Did I live up to their standards, and just the mentorship that I received, was second to none.
Wow. Oh, I can imagine.
Yeah. Well, that kind of brings me to my next question.
A little echo there.
I know. Well, I'm trying to figure out where that's coming from.
It's good now.
Okay. You're probably a perfectionist as well as you shoot, and as much as you've trained for it. Did you ever get to a point where you were like, yeah, I'm pretty good at this? Or is that constantly something you're always striving for?
When I was not as good, I would say that. And as I got better, I realized, it's just crazy. Right? Yeah. It's crazy because the better you get, the more humble you get and realize that you're not the best, Yeah, no, that's, there's so many talented people out there in the firearms community. It's difficult to really, be the best. And I can't remember, which guy had said this, but one of the top shooters basically said something to us one day that kind of hit home. And he said, the difference between first and second place isn't necessarily who is the best. It's just who made the least amount of mistakes. I thought about that. And it's amazing that even at that level, people are still making mistakes, Yeah. But just, it pushes you, it drives you, there's a lot of folks out there that, definitely when it comes to firearms, they overestimate their abilities. We see it with vehicles and driving. People drive all the time, right? And they think they're the best drivers in the world. The reality of it is you drive every day. You become comfortable with this thing. Every day you're driving. People forget almost when they're driving from point A to point B, And then you go to a racing school or an, counterterrorism driving course, and you learn in one day that you suck, imagine like firearms. Most people don't carry a firearm and shoot every day, but yet they think because, they have access to it that they're the best, And that was kind of my thought when I, trained with some of these top professionals, is like, wow, this is my job. I carry this thing, and, right. I'm not that good, I need to get better. And, just always telling yourself you're not good enough is one of those things I think that helps, is makes you realize that as even if at your best level,
Mm-hmm.
you could probably never be good enough because, you put in all this like you're perfect on the range. Everything's perfect.
Mm-hmm.
Well, then when you leave the range, what happens? Well, your gear's set up maybe a little bit different. Maybe if you're concealed, now you have a cover garment. If you're wearing gear, you have other things around you. Most people don't start gunfights standing up, leaning forward in a range. They're probably sitting down or maybe have their hands occupied doing something.
Right.
And so those are things to consider, is that, hey, how do I train for that? I mean, how do I constantly train for everything? The reality of it is that the amount of training that we need to do to get better is actually a small amount. It just takes a little bit of work. So I'm a huge advocate of dry fire. Dry fire is just one of those things that you can get huge returns in a short amount of time, and it's cost free. So
you train CQB and stuff?
Yeah. So I spent 15 years in special forces. My last 3 years I spent in a counterterrorism unit. So our main function was doing CQB and stuff like that. So they call it CRIFs or SIFs. I don't think they exist anymore, but we literally did CQB almost on a monthly basis. Sometimes we would go a week at a time of just doing nothing but CQB. And then
when I was in the 82nd, we had cadre up above the rooms. Is that one of you guys kind of training us and giving us guidance and stuff?
I mean, if that was with special forces, that might have been.
Okay.
But I also spent 2 years as a SFALC instructor, Special Forces Advanced Urban Combat instructor. And you had you were talking about again, you were talking about Rick Hogg being on the show one time.
Oh yeah.
So it's funny because Rick and I go back to like the early 90s, and we were in the same groups at different times. So he was in that SIF that I was talking about, but he was there at a different time. And so it was interesting that, we would talk about CQB and stuff like that and talk about civilian shooting. And that's kind of how we gravitated towards each other, because we weren't satisfied with our levels and we wanted to get better. But, that was one of the things that we did quite often. Especially my last 3 years was just a main primary focus on that type of operations of CQB and stuff like that.
Yeah. Rick was actually just on a really big podcast. I seen him post a thing about it. He was on Mike Ridland's. He actually flew out to be on his podcast. So I'm excited to watch that one. But what a great guy. He actually helped me a little bit with the podcast, show me some ins and outs, what to do, what not to do. So yeah, just very informative, and can't say enough good things about him. So
right. Yeah, no, he's a great guy. I was just at Fort Bragg last month, and I saw Rick, so we got to hang out for a little bit. Yeah.
Do y'all share information, because he runs his tactical thing too? Do y'all kind of like use each other's information, or do y'all got your own? Do you do your own deals?
We kind of do our own deals, but like we'll ask each other, questions or provide information. When he first was getting ready to get out, he called me up and asked me some questions, and then he's got connections with different things, and I'll ask him about I don't know, maybe a different training range or something like that. But I mean, we're at the level where we kind of know the same folks, so it's it's kind of like talking to the echo chamber sometimes,
Yeah, I can imagine. Pipelines, it's a small community, so you guys all know each other.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Well, I had some questions, but it was about CQB, like tactics.
Okay.
What's the most common? I don't know if the viewers care anything about this, but most of the viewers are ex-military. What are the common mistakes you see in entering and clearing buildings?
First thing I see is people going way too fast.
Really?
So they're outrunning their headlights, you know?
I guess there's a propensity to go fast though.
Yeah, there is. But there's you have to look at it from the perspective of if I put you out on a 25-meter range with a rifle and I said run as fast as you can and shoot that target, would you hit that target?
No.
Probably. Yeah.
Probably not.
The same holds true in CQB. So typically is what we would do in our special forces courses is we would spend about anywhere between a 1 week to 2 week period of just working flat range marksmanship. And that would progress to some movement drills and stuff like that. And then after that, you would start doing CQB. You would start off doing dry and then eventually do live fire. And is what tended to happen was those first couple runs that guys would go through live, they would tend to go too fast, and it was kind of an eye opener for them. Like, hey, wait a minute. I just had you on the flat range and you were shooting these targets extremely well at 7 and 10 yards. Now we put in, a room and you're missing this target. What's the reason? And it's because they're not looking through the gun. They're looking over the gun. They're moving too fast. And they're trying to move in an awkward manner, so footing, having the ability to move is probably, the first thing I would say is just going too fast. As far as tactics go, the biggest mistake I see is people not properly using angles, and the third is, not looking for work. There's always work to be done, whether it's clearing another sector, pulling 360 security, rear security, covering down on an area that needs to be cleared or something to that nature. But those are typically my three things that I see is one, going too fast, not looking for work. And then, forgot what I said already.
Doing the small things, following up with it.
Right. And angles. You gotta work the angles. So angles are key when it comes to room clearing.
Yeah. I'm going to shift back to your military career a little bit. What was the best school that you went through in the military, and why was it the best?
Oh, that's kind of a tough one, I'd gone to quite a few really excellent schools. I'd say, anything after the Q course, I would say one Sephardic I thought was probably like one of the best courses I'd gone to. It's 8 weeks of advanced marksmanship, or combat marksmanship and CQB. And it's a lot of explosive breaching, live fire, room clearing, just a really down to earth, incredibly well-ran course. I mean, you're shooting thousands of rounds and, close proximity of 3 to 3 meters in front of the other guy, or just a barrel length off of another guy in a close proximity of a room, And it's amazing that this can happen on a daily basis and no injuries happen. You know how safety conscious the military is. And here we were, day one, we're shooting without headgear on, and we're shooting with just a pistol and a holster. And we're like, wow, this is, not a typical range. So that was probably one of the best, as far as like the amount of skills that I got and, was able to walk away with. But honestly, I think the best school that I'd been to is probably SEER School. I mean, SEER School is one of those ones where you learn more about yourself than anything. You learn what you're willing to tolerate. You learn, what you should do. And you learn that maybe you don't always do what you should do when you need to. And that is, I think you learn your strength and weaknesses about yourself, because you're up constantly towards the end there, and you're put in some really bad positions, especially when you're getting smacked around and haven't eaten in days. So
Now, Sears School is survival school, right?
Right, right. The last few days are you're put into a mock POW camp. So you get interrogated, semi tortured type stuff. But it's a phenomenal school because again you're in that position, and you realize that not everything is black and white, and not everything gets to be you being the winner. I mean, you're put in positions where you're going to lose. That's a losing scenario, and it's like,
Right.
how do I do this and still save face? How do I be able to how am I able to look at myself at the end of the day, at the end of this course, if I was in the real live situation, and of course the key there is, what we tell, what we were told as students was, survive with honor, because you want to return with honor and be able to continue to live and not have some type of regret or more, survivors regret afterwards, because we've done studies on people who get out, and afterwards they're always second guessing what they did. But
Well, speaking of schools, did you get much out of Ranger School? I mean, was that a lot of your leadership?
I tell you, it was to me it was an eye opener. So
Okay.
But it was because of the different types of folks that I was exposed to. So I was already in Special Forces when I went to Ranger School.
Oh,
So when I went to Ranger School, there was the issue of, when you, like, I remember I vividly to this day, I got a no-go on a particular exercise. So the RI Ranger instructor comes up to me and says, "Hey, PL or, APL or whatever, did you do this task?" I'm like, yeah. He's like, "So you mean to tell me that all weapons are clean and you got 100% security right now?" I go, "Yeah, I put it out to the squad leaders." And, so he goes, "All right, come with me." And we started walking the line. And of course, there were people that were sleeping. There were weapons that were dirty. There was people that were eating chow. And it's like, hey, he's like, "I thought you told me that this was all taken care of. You've got a no-go because you didn't take care of these things." And I'm like, "Well, I told my squad leaders." So I realized at that point that you are responsible for everything that your soldiers do or fail to do as a leader. And so I wouldn't call it micromanagement, but you definitely need to follow up. And, as opposed to being on a Special Forces team where, I tell one of those guys to do something or he tells me to do something, well, it's going to get done. And working with a lot of the conventional forces, I realized that they might need a little bit of a push here and there, to make sure that gets done, or at least a good follow-up, because things happen, tasks get oversaturated. And so for me, it was a good learning experience as far as leadership and working outside of the special operations community. Because again, I came from a Special Forces team, and I went there thinking it was going to be the same, and it was uniquely different.
wow.
Yeah. I got to ask this question because I know my buddy's watching. How are the blueberry pancakes?
Oh, yeah, up in the Dahlonega, yeah, there's world famous pancakes up there. It's funny because at the time you're so hungry that you would probably eat as many of them as they would let you, But hindsight being 2020, I have no desire to eat blueberry pancakes.
I can imagine. So I kind of want to shift a little bit. You got a lot of experience with DoD, which is Department of Defense for people that's watching that don't know what that is. What kind of missions did you did overseas, and can you talk about them at all?
Well, as far as like some of the missions I did were, protection. Some of the missions I did were supporting different organizations or military units and stuff like that. But I got to travel quite a bit, while I was over there. I think the biggest, one of my last trips was Afghanistan. And I went all over, and I literally just had me and two other guys, and we just went from fob to fob, base to base. And the great thing was I was in a position where I wasn't micromanaged. They told me I had a mission to do, and I literally was like, okay. And I went in and found air assets and would move from point A to point B. And, I flew all over from Kandahar, Kabul, Bagram, Herat, Marza Sharif. And I just traveled. We did a lot in a short period of time, and ran into a lot of former friends that I had lost touch with. It's amazing how many guys are still in the military, because I figured, hey, when I got out, that all the other guys probably had gotten out too. And then I went to Kandahar, and one of my old buddies is the sergeant major in charge of that whole organization down there, and I had VIP treatment the whole time I was there.
That's awesome.
Yeah, same thing in Bagram. The guys that we were working with were like, hey, come on over and see your old buddies. I'm like, who am I going to see over there? All my buddies are probably retired by now. The OIC over there at that place was a former enlisted guy with me. He got out, came back in as an officer.
Mm-hmm.
The NCOIC was my junior engineer on one of my last teams, and he had progressed up to be an E8 over there. And then the warrant officer was enlisted with me. So I was like, the top three leadership were all old friends. I was like, wow, man, it's hard to believe you guys are still in, but yeah. So that was good. I spent a lot of time. I spent a couple years in Iraq, in and out. And then to me, the huge differences, as far as, you have cultural differences, you have the way things are set up. And the way I think the military occupied those different areas also made a difference. The governments over there made it even more noticeably different. What was allowed in one country wasn't allowed in the other, and stuff like that. But I had a lot more close calls, I'd say, in Iraq than in Afghanistan.
With IEDs and stuff like that.
Well, in Iraq, not just IEDs, but we got shot up a lot of contact. I worked initially when I first got there, I was in Baghdad. So I was going in and out of the green zone to the airport or BIOP, and we'd take Route Irish when most places in 2004, it got so bad that most people weren't traveling on Route Irish at all, and it seemed like every single time we left, it was either an IED or we got shot at. We got hit a couple times where, vehicles were down. We had to rig to tow in our own vehicles. And some close calls with some IEDs, and that just seemed like on a daily occurrence in 04 and early 05,
Yeah.
And then, went back later, and, things were, still kind of bad, but they didn't just seem like quite the wild, wild west as they were in 04, 05. Mm-hmm. Afghanistan, most of my issues there were like indirect fire. I remember one time we had indirect, and a guy that was actually close or further away from the explosion got injured, and I was close enough to get pushed off my feet, and I'm touching my body like, I'm fine, and this guy that was further away is injured, and I was just like, wow, it's weird how shrapnel is going to travel. You just can't really predict some things, yeah, that's
gosh.
I can't really complain though, because when I would drive around in some of the bad areas over in Afghanistan, and I felt more comfortable driving around, dressed up like the locals than when I would travel with a military organization, because you kind of could blend in, but yeah, no, It's I got to work out of some embassies on some of my trips too. So embassy living is good. Can't complain about that. But I'd say all in all, I spent a good amount of time traveling, living overseas for about 6 years, just consecutively. Every other month, if I wasn't in the States, training someone, I'd be back overseas. And it was a good time. Met a lot of people I was in the military with, got out, started working for different government organizations overseas. So you'd see the same folks, I remember my first week in Iraq, I'm in a big military chow hall, and it seemed like I ran into more guys there and just that week than I did if I was back in Fort Bragg.
Wow.
Yeah.
Well, you follow up Afghanistan with. I don't want to get too political. To me, this whole issue is not really a political one to me. To me, it's more of an issue of what's right and what's wrong. So, what are your current thoughts about Afghanistan and what was done? Like I said, I'm not talking about Republican, Democrat. I'm just talking about strictly from a military standpoint. If you were the commander in chief, how would you have gone about this whole ordeal?
Like currently, like right now, or
Like right now, I'm talking about the evacuation.
Well, so I think the first thing is you gotta know your limitations and you gotta know your capabilities. The first is that we have units that are trained in what's we call NEO. Excuse me, and those are non-evacuation operations or evacuations for civilians and military out of foreign countries, and we have military units that are trained to do that. And there are multiple organizations out there. The Marine Corps has those, they have units, and the Army has units, and they're non-combatant evacuations, or NEO. Okay. And there's a plethora of military units that's all they did was train for that type of operation. So if we were to take those organizations and just say, hey, this is your focus, go do it, I think that would really be a huge impact, because not only does the Marine Corps have the MEWs, they have the fast teams. And when I was in Special Forces, the SIFs and the CRIFs, that's other things that they were trained to do. So obviously the size of Afghanistan would probably take more than one of those specialized units, probably take multiple, but we do have the ability to move troops. In 1944, we put 150,000 troops into Normandy. Now obviously we had years of planning and stuff like that. And people say, well, it's kind of a maritime operation, beach landing, and in the I think it was 1990, we put almost 60,000 troops into Saudi Arabia because of the Gulf when Iraq went into Kuwait. So we do have the ability to move troops in a really rapid fashion. Obviously the distance that they have over there, that's the logistical support is one thing, but personally is what I would consider, if I were king for the day, not pointing fingers at anybody, but if I were king for the day, one thing I would do is I would take multiple units that are trained in that, along with units that are QRF units like the 82nd Airborne and 10th Mountain, and along with the Rangers, and I would just occupy by force those areas until we got people out. Now, the thing is that you're not just occupying for an embassy. So it's going to require greater forces. So I would say take your major airports that we had, Kabul, Bagram, Kandahar, and all those pre-existing places, and go in and lock them down. And then basically just go house to house and say, hey, we're looking for AMSITs. We're looking for civs. We're looking for anyone that's a green card holder or has a visa. And that's all we want is get out. Now, the thing is that people are like, well, we're not willing to go into a prolonged war. Well, if we did it, we got in on the ground and we were there for, 2 weeks, 3 weeks, whatever it took, then you could be in and out in just, a couple of weeks. And that's all we're asking for, is to get our folks out. People don't seem to realize that, there are people actively trying to prevent Americans from leaving, and if it's not them actively trying to prevent individuals from leaving, then they're actively shutting down roads to prevent others from leaving, which is going to scare Americans. I mean, would you want to go through a checkpoint that is ran by Taliban folks, if you're an American trying to leave, So those are things that we have to consider, is make those checkpoints, occupy them by Americans, get our folks out and then leave. If the current administration feels that, we no longer need to be in Afghanistan, I'm not gonna contradict that. But at the same time, we need to get our folks out. So let's get our folks out and then leave. That would be my suggestion. Not a ding or a critique on anyone, but that would be what I would do if I were, commander in chief for the day.
Yeah. So you got these Afghans wanting to leave, which I don't blame them, but they're loading all these people up and flying them into Mexico. Our borders are wide open. How do we know that Taliban or terrorists are not coming in with these guys blending in? Because you know how they blend in with everybody, and now they're coming in through our country because we got open borders. It's a huge problem we got going on. How do you feel about that? Because I honestly can't stand it. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I'm less concerned about that being an issue. I think that there is a process, and that's the problem. The process that people don't realize is that the State Department is undermanned, understaffed, and they're overworked. So they have to process these background checks on people. Now with a lack of infrastructure, it's going to be much more difficult for them to do that. But that doesn't mean that we can't bring folks in to do overtime, to bring additional folks in to help and assist with that. You'd be surprised how many people would volunteer to come back and work for the services if there was an all call per se.
Oh yeah.
We've seen it. We've seen, there's plenty of veterans out there that are going through the process of trying to smuggle people out from the north and stuff like that. But the issue and problem with that is that once they start doing that, if those folks aren't vetted, then we run into that same problem that you were just talking about, that maybe there's going to be some Taliban folks. But again, I'm less concerned about that. I'm more concerned about getting folks out. If we get them out as soon as possible and we hold them, and then we go through the process of trying to do background checks after they're here, okay, we're good. We found out you're a Taliban dude, we're going to send you back, but there's nothing that says that we can't bring folks back and isolate them, bring them here and find out more. I mean, we've got military bases. We're bringing folks in, the biggest difference is, these people that we're looking at. I mean, if we're willing to look at bringing in folks that are illegally crossing the border, illegally trying to get into this country, then I think we can do the same thing for people that fought for us, that worked for us, that were our allies, and run the risk of being killed and slaughtered because of their religion, their tribe, or just their affiliation with America. So I think if we can take, people that broke the law and give them assistance and hold them in different, military installations along the border, and we should be able to do the same thing with people who are allies to us. I don't dismiss the fact that there may be some, people trying to infiltrate America through malicious means. But again, if we bring them in and we go through that process after they're here, at least we have the ability to go, okay, we've processed them. We found out that you were not a good person. We're going to send you back. But if we leave the other 100 that back in that country that are good folks, well, those other 100 people run the risk of just being slaughtered,
Yeah. No, you put in a great point, and I'm glad you did it the way you did.
Yeah, I mean, I've talked to a lot of people about the Afghanistan situation with friends and family, and one guy said that we should send our troops back into Afghanistan. That brings up a good question to me. How do you know when an area is stable enough for you to leave? Like, how long do you stay there? I mean, you just stay there forever? I mean, I don't understand how you can stabilize a region and then leave and expect people not to get upset about it.
Well, the first problem is that the way that America waged war in the past was not considered politically correct. So you had all these people who were complaining about American empire building or American, imperialistic, growing or just, I don't know what they would, colonization of the world. Show me that empire. Show me those colonies. They don't exist. But when we went into Japan, we went into Germany. When did we shut our bases down there?
They're still there.
Exactly. And the governments, the way that they were ran, they were mentored and advised by American officials. Now, the problem and issue with that is people go, well, they were puppet governments, to America. Well, if they were puppet governments, then what do we get out of it? Because one, who has the best economy in Europe right now? Well, Germany flat out controls everything, as far as the economy goes. I mean, we have no say what the Germans can do whatever they want, Who is which country is the most technologically advanced? I mean, they have they're selling cars in the U.S. Every device is made. At one point, all of your top level DVDs and stuff like that and televisions were made coming out of Japan. So we look at that and say, well, we're not controlling them. If anything, they're probably have more influence on us than the other way around. So we definitely they're not puppet governments to the United States. But people, they didn't like that. They didn't like the fact that we did what we did. The reality of it is that we probably should have done that in Iraq and Afghanistan. We have previous experience and doctrine that shows what works in those other countries. The reality of it is that Afghanistan will never be stable. It's the one thing that people don't realize. Afghanistan, if you look at the history of Afghanistan, Afghanistan probably should have never been a country as formed as it is today. It should probably be up to 6 countries or more, broken up. You have so many different tribes and cultures there that people don't understand that. Afghanistan didn't say, hey, this is Afghanistan and drew it on a map, Was it Alexander the Great or someone decided it was going to be that way? So that region, I don't think will ever be stable. We just have to realize that if we were going to go in there from the beginning and go, okay, what can we do? But you figure you have 20-year-olds in Afghanistan who know no other way of life. They never lived under the Taliban. Okay. So now that we're leaving, what's going to happen when the Taliban takes over? Are they going to put up with that? Or are they going to want to go back to a different way of life? And that will really be, I think, the test of how well did we instill our values, and not just American values, but world values, because that's the goal. Because all the allies that were there were doing the same thing, we do this nation building thing. The reality of it is that in order to get to nation building, you need to just basically take over, and then you need to structure things differently. And it takes generations to weed out, bribes and, just things that are unsavory or just, against the, human laws, that we know, that are going on, when you are an enemy combatant held by some countries, they kill you right away, you know. So imagine these guys have gone through this process. We talk about human rights when we were there, trying to train these folks to do the right thing. Is that still going to be going on? Well, it may or may not. But had we had another generation or so of doing that, it may have, you know, left them more of an imprint there. But I mean, who knows? It's too Afghanistan. I think is too volatile to really be one of those countries that's ever going to be without war. You know, they have been in war, I think, since the creation of Afghanistan. You know, once we leave, they'll be at war with each other.
Yeah. I hear the echo.
It's not
You
me
do a
this
lot on the
time.
tactical side, and you run green ops. If there's a civilian listening that wants to join a class, you know, what platform would you, you know, what platform would you ask them to bring? What tactical gear, or what kind of stuff would you tell them to bring?
Well, I mean, obviously, I mean, it depends on the class. So, you know, with our carbine classes, you know, I recommend you know, a good, you know, we're teaching AR-15 specific type classes. We have folks that show up to classes, an AR type of a class with AKs and stuff like that. But we always tell them, hey, you know, this is a class that's designed for the AR platform. So you can bring your you know, you can bring your IWI, you can bring your AK, you can bring your bullpup, whatever you want to bring. We don't care. But just remember that the manipulations, malfunction drills, and everything we're going to do are going to be specific towards the AR platform. So we do run like an AK specific class, but the great thing about our you know, our carbine classes or carbine series is that you should be able to run just about everything. There's going to be small variations and stuff like that. But you know, we recommend a top quality carbine. You know, I'm on a pro staff for Sons of Liberty Gunworks. They're based out of San Antonio, Texas, and they make some of the finest carbines ever. And we tell folks like, hey, if you want a good carbine, you know, look at Sons of Liberty Gunworks. But that's not to say that we don't think that BCM is another great gun. You know, that doesn't mean that we don't think that you know, Colt makes good guns and stuff like that. But we want folks to look at, you know, Psionics and other really good quality gun manufacturers, because what's proven to work is what works. You know, and they're expensive for a reason. Good quality guns are just they're machines when they're out there on the line, and you can see, you know, we have all kinds of guns come to a class, you know, and then you start seeing correlation with some of the cheaper guns, you know, and you start going, ooh, you know, and then you have to realize, hey, you're training with this gun. Do you want to have your life depend on it? So, like you know, I have a bunch of cheap carbines, AR-15 type platforms. They're good plinking guns. I got them at a really good rate when they were on sale, you know, but I don't use those as my home defense guns. I don't take them to training because they're not going to make it through most of the classes that we teach, you know. But a good solid BCM, Sons of Liberty Gunworks, you know, LWRC or something like that, if you're into the impingement system there. But a good mid-length gun, you know, I think is perfect. The pistols, man, there's so many variations out there of pistols right now. I mean, now there are more top quality handguns out there today than there has been in the last 20 years. I mean, think about it. You know, back in the day you had, you know, and even before that, 20 years before that, you had even less, you know. But it used to be, hey, you know, you've got a like a 226 SIG, you get the Beretta and a Glock, and that was pretty much it 20 years ago. Now you've got like M&P 2.0s. You've got these. You've got. I'm at a loss here. You got the newer SIGs that are out there, the 320s, and then not just full size guns, but look at the broad range of compact guns out there that function extremely well. So I always tell folks, this is my thought process for a gun. If you're going to buy a gun, you're going to take a gun to class, I would say you don't really want to bring a compact gun to class because they're hard to shoot. The recoil management is difficult because of the size of the barrel. Now, again, that's in general. With some of the newer subcompact guns that we're seeing out there, they're able to get through classes, no problem. But in general, I want a little bit of a bigger gun. So maybe not a subcompact, but maybe more like a compact, like a Glock 19 size gun or a compact 320 or something like that. But I tell folks, if you're going to decide to buy a gun, don't buy a new gun that nobody's heard of. Don't buy a new gun that's on the front page of a gun magazine. Buy a gun that is in use by a major law enforcement agency or a military organization, because it's gone through testing and so on and so forth. And just like the Beretta, as much as people complained and hated that Beretta, let me tell you what, the Beretta was a really outstanding gun. It shot ammunition like you wouldn't believe it. It wasn't finicky at all. The biggest issue I saw with the Beretta was the locking block would break after a couple thousand rounds typically. If you bought an aftermarket locking block, it functioned just fine. But yeah, I'd say if you're going to select a firearm or a pistol, look at something that's out there in a major law enforcement or military organization. I shoot Glocks. I'm a huge fan of Glocks, not because they're the best gun out there, but because they are the most available gun out there. So if I go into a gun store, more than likely I can almost guarantee I can find a Glock holster, I can find Glock magazines, and I can find Glock parts. You take your new gun that just came out, that's on the front page of a magazine, and you get out there, and you're going to have problems finding parts for that. Mm-hmm. The reality of it is Glocks are everywhere. I mean, every government agency, I think, is using Glocks. The military is using them. Not your major conventional forces, but all the special forces guys are using Glocks right now. And there's a reason for that. My wife was shooting a Glock. I was carrying a SIG back in the day. I went into a gun store. I needed something for her gun and my gun, and mine, I first asked about my SIG, and they're like, well, it's going to take us a couple weeks to order the part. It's going to cost you $130. I'm like, oh my gosh. Oh, and we don't have a holster or an extra magazine that you wanted here. We'll have to order that too. I'm like, damn it. Like, okay, well, my wife needs this. How long is it going to take? And they're like, oh, well, we've got all that in the store. And oh, that part that needs fixed. Well, we'll take it and fix it right now. And then afterwards they bring the gun out, and well, I'm like, what's the charge for the gunsmithing on it? And they're like, no charge. We had extra parts, like, you kidding me, So I always tell folks at the end of the world, there's going to be two things around: cockroaches and Glocks. Glocks are going to be everywhere. All right. Now, when I shoot I shoot other guns, on occasion I buy other guns, they shoot, like, for example, staccato. Have you ever shot a staccato?
No.
It's so flat. It's remarkably flat. It's like the gun doesn't move. Right. So I did a shoot with staccato. They're actually up in Austin. I did a shoot with them a couple months ago, and phenomenal gun. And it's an expensive gun. And people ask me, oh man, is it worth it? Well, if you shoot it one time, you're going to walk away and go, Yeah, it is, because it's a phenomenal shooting gun. And if you can find holsters for it and magazines, good on you, you know. But I'll tell you what, man, that's a phenomenal shooting gun right there. And it's a newer gun. But again, the reason why I would say buy it is because the U.S. Marshals use it, you know. And that just goes back to what I say is, hey, pick a gun that's been picked up by a major law enforcement agency. Do I think it's better than Glock? Oh, heck yeah. Does it mean I'm going to stop shooting Glock? Well, no, I probably have 100 Glock magazines, you know. I mean,
Everybody's got a Glock.
yeah, exactly. You know,
That's what I
so
carry.
And plus, it's just point and shoot, right? Your fingers are safety.
yeah, that's it. But yeah, I don't think. I mean, again, I don't think Glock is the best gun in the world at all. You know, some of these H&Ks, Walthers are heavy guns. They're phenomenal shooting guns. You know, but again, you know, are they picked up by a law enforcement agency? The answer to both of those is yes, they are. But the question is that do you have 100 magazines laying around in that caliber for that gun, you know? And for me, I do in Glock, you know, I can preload my Glock magazines, go to the range, and I don't have to load a single magazine during my range time because I got so many of them, you know what I mean?
Yeah. That's awesome.
Yeah.
Well, Alan, you got another question, or I got one?
Yeah, go ahead, man.
I was just I think we've been on for a while, so I just wanted to follow up with this last question from me. When you're all done, what are you going to miss the most?
You know, I think the reality of it is no matter how we look at it, folks that do, you know, this kind of stuff, it's going to be the people, you know. I have, one of my guys, Chris Alvarez, he's up in Maryland. He's getting ready to start traveling overseas, but, I met him. He started coming to classes, and he came to several classes, driving all the way down from Maryland. And, you know, he's a former Special Forces guy, and I'm talking to him. I'm like, man, you've been to these classes before. Why do you keep coming back? And he's like, dude, he goes, I'm retired and I'm a full-time college student. He goes, I just can't stand, you know, these professors and the way they're brainwashing people. And he's like, you know, I'm not around people like me and like us, you know?
Yeah.
And I was like, well, why don't you just start working for us, you know? And that's how we got, you know, Chris involved with us. But he's a phenomenal guy. He's competed in multiple tactical athlete games, you know, in his 40s, you know. And he's just one of those guys that made me realize that, you know, being out of the service for so long, we tend to gravitate towards each other, and we have each other. You know, if I need something, I can call him. If he needs something, he can call me. I'm just a phone call away. But you know, being around like-minded individuals is really a big thing. And I think that goes back to, you know, when people get out of the military, they have a hard time adjusting because, you know, I worked up in the DC area, and there were times when, you know, I didn't care for the guys I worked with or worked around. You know, I didn't care about, you know, some of the people that I saw on a daily basis. And it's like, you know, I felt like I have more of a bond with the Iraqi unit members that I worked with. I feel like I have more of a bond or a closer relationship with them than I do most Americans, you know, because they're more like us or like me. They're soldiers, they're military people, you know. You take away the religion and the politics, and inside they're just like us, man. Like they just want one thing, and they want to be able to have a safe environment, you know, and they're willing to kill anyone that gets in that way. They're willing to kill terrorists, risk their lives for their country so that their kids can go to school and their wives can, you know, start going to school and stuff like that. And people, they don't realize how, you know, much of a likeness there is, you know, with stuff like that. It's ridiculous because, you know, when I remember I had a buddy who retired, he got out of the military and he was working in an office, and he said, "Hey, do you miss it? Do you miss being on a team?" And I was like, "No, not really." And he's like, "What do you mean?" I'm like, "Well, I was working as a contractor. I was deploying overseas with guys on the contract that I was on that had a minimum of 8 years of special operations time to get on the contract. So to me, it was like still being on a team, you know?" And so I didn't realize what he was going through as far as like having that inability to adjust to being a civilian, because, you know, he was having that issue, and, you know, I didn't have that issue. So it was easier for me, and because of the guys I was working with. And I found that, you know, when you're out, if you don't maintain contacts or get into a hobby or an environment where people are like you, then you're going to have a problem adjusting, you know? So that's something that we need to remember, is that, you know, when we think that we're away from our comrades, well, there's new comrades out there. There's other folks that have been through similar type situations as us, and get involved, you know, going and, you know, like for, you know, meeting Chris up in Northern Virginia, you know, another Green Beret, we got to hang out on weekends, you know, and to me, that was, you know, a big help, you know, and I believe it was the same for him. Same thing here. You know, we have locally here in San Antonio, we have Long Tab Brewery, it's a, you know, long tab, i.e. like the Special Forces long tab. And you go down there on Fridays, and there's Green Berets down there, you know. The owner is a former Green Beret. I walked in there, and he and I went to the Q course together. You know, talking about a small world, you know. And he's got pictures, on his walls, you know, he's got pictures of different ODAs and teams, you know. But it's something that we need to realize, is that, you know, if things get really bad because you feel isolated, reach out, you know, get back into it with somebody, you know, go out, even if it's something like going hiking, doing some field craft, going camping, going to the range, you know. It's stuff we need to do. We need to get guys back together, so that they have less of an issue or problem, you know. There's guys that I was in Iraq with as contractors, that even though we weren't in the military together, we're just as tight as if the guys I served with when I was in the military, you know. And you know, I linked up with a guy who was a SEAL, and he came to San Antonio, and we got together, and it was like, wow, man, I really missed him, and it was great to see him. And you know, one of the issues is that if people are isolated and alone, you know, they don't have anyone to call, they're going to feel different. They're going to feel alone. They're going to feel like they got no one to talk to. So they need to get involved. They need to get involved with something that's going to bring them back to the bonding that they had with other folks, you know, and do something, you know. I'm lucky and fortunate that I work around people that are more like-minded, you know. I work around awesome individuals, and it's to the point where I feel like, you know, many times when I'm looking at the people that are there, it's like, hey, you know, I'm lucky to be here. I'm lucky to work around such professionals, you know. And that's that feeling that I had when I was in Special Forces. So I'm happy that I got that feeling again.
Yeah. Now, your tactical green ops that you run, say a veteran comes in, do they get a discount for coming in? Because I know people are going to ask me, you know, if they're in that area. I know a lot of guys around that area where you're at, and if, you know, I don't know if they get a discount or something.
Yeah, we
like
always
that.
get military, veterans, law enforcement. We always get veterans, military, and law enforcement discounts. Okay.
Man, you kind of answered the question without me even asking it. I kind of like to leave the show with, you know, I started this because I want to help veterans, you know, dealing with PTSD, suicidal thoughts. You know, I've never had my personal experience on myself, but I know guys that have. And if one were to call you and, you know, say, "Hey man, I'm got thoughts of suicide," what kind of words of encouragement would you give to them?
Well, the biggest thing is that it's not worth it. You know, there's whatever's happening. All right. It's troubling times, you know. I mean, think about some of the stuff that we survived overseas and we're in the States and we're having a hard time. Yeah, it feels like a really bad time, regardless of what it is, but we can make it through this. We made it through being overseas in war zones. Is what they need is they just need to communicate, you know, find other veterans to talk to, other folks that they served with, and you know, get help. You know, that's the other thing is, I mean, think about your A types. You know, your A types out there. They feel like it's a weakness to ask for help. You know,
They isolate.
A buddy of mine runs a thing for, you know, helping guys out. And same thing, a guy called him, was talking about killing himself, and the guy started crying. He goes, "I'm sorry." And he's like, "You're sorry for crying?" He goes, "Yeah." He goes, "I'm sorry." He goes, "Don't be sorry, dude. You know, it's like you're venting right now. Let it out, you know." And those are things that we need to realize, is that it's okay to feel emotional, you know. I mean, you think about, like, there's this constant push in society for, you know, men to, you know, which we consider would be to be weak. You know, crying is one of them, you know. But at the same time in society, they say, hey, you need to show your emotions, but you don't show anger. Well, anger is an emotion. Why can't we show anger? You know, we should be able to easily show anger just as much as we show sadness and regret, you know. I think the issue is that we tend to bottle up our emotions. And so when we're angry, you know, we kind of bottle it up, and it builds. And when you feel sad, you bottle it up, you know, and it builds, you know. We've seen great recovery from folks who have found something that they're interested in, and it becomes a passion, and it keeps them busy, you know. A lot of guys maybe turn to physical fitness or something like that. But if that's not your thing, find something else, you know. There's a lot of folks out there that will find something that was similar to what they did in the military, or even if it's just gets them to you know, a place where they can talk to like-minded individuals. It makes a huge difference, you know, because the thing that I miss the most about the military isn't necessarily the jobs that we did. It's the folks that I worked with. You know, working around those guys, you just you cannot recreate the level of just razzing that people did with each other, you know. And you guys know it. You know what, civilians would never ever be able to hear someone talk down to another person and then they turn around and laugh about it, you know. Yeah. You know, I mean, it's some of it's just high comedy, you know. And you know, I remember one of the first times we got hit on Route Irish. I have a 240, and I've got the 100-round drum, you know, on there. And the guy next to me had been saying, "Hey man, you might want to put that nutsack on there because that drum, I got this, right?" So we get hit, and I jump out like Rambo. And I got this drum, you know, and I'm ready to go. And all of a sudden you hear this zip crash. And it was that box came undone and it fell and hit the ground right in the middle of Route Irish, you know. And I'm just like, man, I'm more concerned about I'm not worried about getting shot at this point anymore. Now I'm worried about what my buddies think about me. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So
your ego gets eat up.
Yeah. So I sit there and you know, I roll this the rest of the ammo. I'm rolling around my arm. I look like Johnny Rambo running down Route Irish there, you know. And you know, it was pretty intense at the time. But afterwards, man, those guys never let me live that down, you know.
That's awesome, man.
but you just couldn't do that you might hurt somebody's feelings if you did that today, but
Exactly. Everybody
Man,
wears their emotions on their shoulders. You know what I mean? Too many
Yeah.
soft individuals.
yeah.
And I hate saying it like that, but there's a lot of beta males out there. You know what I mean? They're just drives me nuts.
And the thing is that, you look at the age differences too. I was at Fort Bragg a couple months ago. Was it this August? So last month, July, I was just there, and I was working around some special forces guys that were half my age, and they're identical, man. They're identical, Um, they are just as witty, just as ruthless to each other as we were back in the day. So, I don't know. I hear people talk about these millennials, but I'm telling you, these guys, not only that, but they're better. They're better than I was when I was that age, they're stronger, they're faster, they're smarter. But deep down inside, they're still A-types, and they razz each other. I watched them just tear into one guy one day, everybody. And the guy turns around after everyone's done messing with him and he goes, well, I guess it's bust on Johnny day,
Yeah. Busting balls day. Yep.
Yeah. So, but yeah, they're great. I'm telling you, these guys today, it's amazing to see them doing what they're doing. And, I definitely don't want to, if anyone says anything about these young kids in the military, they don't know what it's like. I'm telling you, they've been there, they've done that. They've been overseas. And they are stronger, fitter, faster, and definitely smarter. So good on them, and I just hope that when they get out that, they remember those good times and they continue to drive on.
Yeah, that was the last thing I was going to ask you. What would you tell a younger you?
Ooh, man, I would say, one, don't get married until you're 40.
Agreed 100%. Hit the nail on the head, brother.
Yeah. We joke about it, but the truth is you look at like the Spartans, when they were out in the military, they couldn't be married while they're in the military, I believe. You don't realize how much of, and it's not to say that the issue is them. It's us. I mean, think about it. How can I be a good father, a good husband when I'm gone and going through all these different emotions from being overseas and stuff like that? It's difficult. I don't think it's fair to them. Who cares if it's fair to us? But the reality of it is that there's been plenty of marriages that were, broken up because of military deployments and stuff like that. And just military careers,
Jody.
Yeah, that too.
Jody's got your girl.
Yeah, but no, it's the
sad thing about that song is it's actually true.
Yeah, it is. Yeah. We were there. You guys were at Fort Bragg. If that's the deal. And if you're not married, you don't have to worry about it. But yeah, I would say, look at, push marriage off, the biggest thing I would say is I think that, education and fitness, really need to be pushed really a little bit harder in the military, they're coming out with a new PT test for the military, this new ACFT, Army Combat Fitness Test. I think that's a good thing. But when you're younger, you need to get into it when you're younger, because when you get to be older, and if you're not doing it right, then you're going to be in pain, and, you do stupid things. Like I did a ruck march, like a 12-mile ruck with a broken foot one time, I knew it was broken. I was like, I'll get through it. Well, now first half of the day, that foot hurts, and it's in constant pain, so I think, smarter fitness, better fitness today that we have the ability to do that so that we can have longevity when we get to be older, and it affects you, because if you're the better shape you were in when you were younger, when you get older, it has that lasting effect,
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Man, I had this thing wrote down. I wasn't going to ask you, but I got to ask you. You know, it eats me alive when I see it. You know, how do you feel? And this is, you don't have to answer if you don't want. How do you feel about women going into Ranger school, coming into SF community? How do you feel about that?
You know, I have varying opinions, and the first opinion is one, I don't care. You know, I don't think it's the big thing is the standards are there, keep them the same. And
Yep.
if they pass, they pass. That's my first opinion. The second opinion is let's find out what it does to the unit, what happens to the individual, the unit, and then the individual, being i.e. the female. What happens to them long term? Those are things we need to study. So two things. One, well, let's first start about like all the services. When they said that, hey, they were going to start incorporating women in SOF, all the services except for the Navy started changing their standards. Well, we're not lowering them. We're just changing them. Okay. So that was the first thing. The Navy's and they took a year to get ready. The Navy said, we're ready now. And they didn't change a thing, you know? And so good on the Navy for doing that, you know? And I guarantee you the woman that passes BUDS is going to be a badass stud. Probably more fit than all three of us combined. Okay.
Yeah, I'm sure.
Yeah. And, you know, now we've got women that graduated Ranger School. Good on them, you know? And here's the other thing is people will sit there and say, well, you know, they didn't have the same standard, blah, 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 this, blah, blah, that. They still went to Ranger School. You know, you can't take the suck out of Ranger School. You know what I mean? So good on them for graduating, going through that process, you know? And as long as we keep it fair, I think we'll be good. But now we got to look at, you know, like the Marine Corps did a study of integrating troops into the units. And they found a couple things. They found that it didn't work out as well as they thought it was. The question is, does that mean we need to stop? Well, no, we need to look at why. Okay. We need to try to rectify and fix. If we can't fix, then maybe we do something different. But the other thing is that what happens to that woman? All right. Long-term studies right now, unless someone has something different, is showing that they're more prone to injuries later on. Now, is it fair to not tell them that? If they know that, hey, you may have this issue or that issue in the future, and give them the full medical advice or knowledge that they would need before they get involved in this, then yeah, let them do it. You know, I don't have a problem with that. You know, they should have the right to do it just as much as anybody else. But when you start changing standards, lowering standards, then I have issues, you know. And I'll tell you, I worked out at the Army SEER School for a little bit, and any woman that went through that school probably deserves that certificate more than any man, because they got it 10 times worse.
Oh,
They got it 10 times worse. They got hit more than any man. They got more interrogations than any man. And so if I ever meet a woman that's been to Army SEER School, you know, I can guarantee you that no standard was lowered for them. If anything, the standard was raised. Okay. Because they use that. They know that that's a weakness for people going through the school, you know, and so they exploit it. So any woman that's been to SEER School, you know, I'm just like, hey, good on you. Cause you got, like, if I was in their shoes, I don't know if I would have been able to get through that school, getting hit as much as they did and getting, you know, isolated as much as they did. So those are things that we need to consider is, you know, is giving them all the information they need. And then what are the long-term effects, you know, and then if we can't mitigate those long-term effects, then we just need to be realistic about it, you know, but I hate the political side of it of, hey, you know, forcing it down your throat, you know.
Yeah.
I think there's a thing that the Ranger Regiment now has a female in their in regiment now, you know. And I haven't heard anyone complain about it, you know. So from the outside, people may be complaining, but what are the troops on the line in the unit where they're saying? That's the more important thing, you know.
Yeah.
But I dislike the whole lowering of standard, changing of standards, or anything like that, because it's not fair to them. It's not fair to the units, and it's not fair to the soldiers altogether. You know, But the ones that have done it and are the doing what they're doing now, good on them. You know, I mean, I see a woman with a Ranger tab, you know, that I know that she, you know, endured the suck for a long period of time, you know, and good on her and congratulations, you know. But when we start forcing people to do things that they don't know is going to injure them, yeah, I think we're setting people up for failure, you know.
Yeah. Well, Mike, I appreciate you coming on. You one hell of a podcast, man. You answered everything
Michael,
spot
it was
on.
awesome.
I appreciate it, guys. I appreciate
we
being
really
here.
enjoyed you, man.
Good deal, man. I hope hopefully I can get you guys to come down here and jump into a class sometime in the future.
Absolutely. I got a bunch of buddies out in that area. I used to actually come to, well, the Fort Worth area about 2 times a year. So
Oh, okay.
I know
Very
Texas like the back of my hand. Good barbecue joints around there. So
cool. Love brisket, man.
yes, sir. Yes, sir. Yeah, I would love to come out, take a couple vacation days, come join a class. I'm actually doing one with Kevin Owens. I don't know if you're familiar with him or not.
No.
He does some stuff with Mike Glover.
Oh, okay.
With Fieldcraft Survival. I'm joining one of their classes September 18th. So get a little tactical training under my belt with them guys, and then hell, I'd like to do one with Rick and then one with you as well. So
yeah, Fieldcraft
awesome.
Survival. They're running some really good stuff. Yeah.
So, but man, like I said, I'm honored you came on. I appreciate your podcast. Was awesome. You answered everything thorough, and you know I throw some monkey wrenches at you that were kind of tough to answer, but you answered them well, man, and I appreciate it so much.
Well, thanks for having me on, guys. I appreciate it. You know?
Yes, sir.
Yeah.
All right.
Have a good weekend, and I'll keep in touch with you, brother.
All right. You guys too. All right.
Yes, sir.
Take care.
All right.